Hello and welcome to CX Today. My name is Charlie. I am the senior editor here, and I'm thrilled today to bring you a rundown of 10 CRM vendors to look out for in 2025. And joining me for that conversation are two expert guests in everything CRM. Yesterday, I'm delighted to be joined by Rebecca Wetterman, CEO and Principal Analyst at Valois, and Martin Schneider, VP and Principal Analyst at Constellation Research. Thanks both very much for joining me, and let's get right on into the discussion. And I just want to start by framing this video a little bit and noting that this isn't a vendor evaluation where we rank sort of the best CRM providers for 2025. If you want something like that, do go to Valois, do go to Constellation Research websites, and you can download the market reports. Instead, we're really focusing on pinpointing the vendors that are catching the eye with differentiated strategies moving into the new year. So now that important message is out of the way, let's get on to our conversation. And the first vendor that I have on my list is Zoho, which I know you both really want to talk about. But I don't know, Rebecca, if you could start with what makes Zoho stand apart.
Sure. I mean, I think Zoho's approach as providing sort of the operating system for business is one that resonates with a lot of smaller customers, but certainly they're going up market. And I think the exciting thing to think about is all of the platform capabilities that can apply to, not just in CRM, but as I think about HCM and finance and supply chains and all the other areas that Zoho touches. You know, they just came out with payroll for the US, which is an incredibly complicated thing. The idea that I could have that visibility across multiple business units, not just CRM, means that within a sales functionality capability, I can think about, do I have availability to promise from a supply chain and product perspective? What are the financing details from a finance perspective? Do I have the people to deliver from a service perspective? All of those sort of things within one platform.
Yeah, I think that's really important. What you're really seeing is them breaking down the total cost of ownership in a sense that really does drive value to the end users in really interesting ways. At the same time, building out both from deliverability, reliability, scalability, as well as the breadth of the applications to really become as close to like enterprise ready as really any one vendor could be. They're already talking about multi-million seat deployments globally. So, you know, they've built their own infrastructure, which some people looked at a little strangely, but for what they're doing, it's interesting. Their AI strategy is a little interesting. They're going very multimodal. They're looking at a lot of things and kind of building it themselves, which again will, when you look at the kind of use cases that Rebecca was talking to, they will help that a lot because they won't just be generic kind of white labeled or, you know, slapped over, you know, ChatGPT or something inside. So I think, you know, on the long tail of their AI strategy even is really smart. So they've set themselves up really well. I think there's a few things, you know, there's obviously a few gaps, but when you look at, you know, for the cost to value for what they do, I don't think there's really anybody with the breadth and the scope, you know, in terms of being wide and deep, right? So really interesting to see how they keep on going in 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Zoho is one of those companies that marches to the beat of its own drum, isn't it? So,
Sure.
yeah, a really great one to start with there, I think. And the next one on our list is another very prominent vendor in this space, and that is HubSpot. I don't know, Martin, if you want to start on this one.
Yeah, I think, you know, HubSpot's been doing interesting things, really has done a fine job of branching out outside of its core, let's call it MarTech, marketing automation, demand gen base. uh, Kind of, you know, seeing some, you know, stalling in the customer service side of things. Sales automation has been pretty good. And then, you know, their AI story was a little like, and now they've just picked up Frame, which is really interesting because what a lot of these core, like when it comes from CRM and CRM is their base, there's not a lot of unstructured data management capabilities or, you know, intelligence, AI, you know, can really stall there because the the data story is never as good as you really need it to be when you're thinking about either like just sales data or just, you know, what the users put into it kind of thing, right? It's usually quality and scope and volume and blah, 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 right? But now having this ability to much more quickly take advantage of and pull signals and extract signals out of unstructured data around all interactions, not just what's the sales calls, what are the cases, and really kind of pull that. And what Frame does with that really gives them a really interesting story, not around just boosting their AI message in general, but really giving more credence to their ability to be more proactive and predictive around the entire customer journey. So I think it's going to be really interesting how they integrate and productize that in 2025 and beyond, because it does, when you look at, again, some of those other mid-market and SMB players across each of the sales and marketing and service, a lot of them don't have a great AI story. A lot of them don't have a good anything other than maybe some are good at marketing, some are good at sales, some are good at support. So, HubSpot's really starting to strengthen its triumvirate of sales, marketing, and support. Frame is really going to help that. So again, interesting to see how they continue to develop that and move again kind of more solidly into the upper end of the mid-market. They really do well in that upper SMB, lower mid-market. They've done that really well. So it's interesting to see how they continue to build on what they've done around becoming a suite, right? Because they were kind of there. I think this brings them further.
Yeah, I mean, they were arguably one of the most successful in the market at using a freemium model to become a suite player out of marketing, right? So now it's sort of like, what is the next step and how do they cement that position? Because let's face it, moving forward with AI, I really need my sales, marketing, service data together to really be able to get the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think how they've continued to evolve that pricing model is quite interesting. The changes that they've made this year to create different types of seat and then giving people access to just view their CRM for free. I think that's and extend that view kind of across to extend the view across the organization has been really interesting.
Yeah, you're seeing more and more of that. Yeah, even Zoho's doing that to bring them back into it. They've got the CRM for everyone concept, and there's really, and read-only licenses have been around for a while, but making them free and making them really simple to deploy is different, and it is a development that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the collaborative CRM from Zoho is another good point on them, actually, too. But I will move the conversation on now to us, the third vendor, and that's the 800-pound gorilla in the space, and that is Salesforce. I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to give your take first on them.
Sure. So Agentforce, and I'll pass it off to Martin.
And I'll just add three more Agentforce.
Obviously, the Agentforce stuff is really interesting, being arguably first to market with an agentic AI solution. I've been talking to customers, and what they were able to do within a very short period of time is pretty amazing, because you're leveraging everything that Salesforce already built, from the workflow to the trust layer to Copilot, in just a way to be able to pull together these agents at a degree of accuracy that is impressive pretty quickly. I will say, for a lot of customers that maybe didn't have all their Salesforce knowledge already, or those that didn't necessarily have a neat and tidy data set, which we know for a lot of folks is the case, it's not going to be as straightforward, right? Because it's the same adage with any kind of technology like this: garbage in, garbage out. But what we are seeing is customers who built out things in knowledge or even had unstructured data being able to upload and get some pretty reasonable results within a pretty short time period.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you look at Data Cloud being able to handle more unstructured data, that's really big. When you look at Data Cloud being more pre-integrated through foundations to enable users of the other, the discrete clouds to be able to start tackling AI and agentic AI, they're trying to make it as much of an easy button as they can, as much as they can, right? And that's always with an asterisk. But really, one of the things that I think when you kind of look at the clouds themselves that got really overlooked at Dreamforce, and even just over the last few months with Salesforce obviously going really full tilt on the Agentforce story, is like innovation down at the actual like user level. And I don't know how much AI and the ability to code faster and do other things is helping them. Like, how much are they actually using their own, drinking their own champagne, as people like to say. But when you look at Sales Cloud, for example, I mean, the innovations that they actually talked about at Dreamforce were impressive when you look at the kind of stasis of that product for a while, adding more account plans, doing more conversational intelligence, doing more things that really bring Revenue Cloud and Sales Cloud together to create, that pipeline to paycheck story that they're kind of telling, which is really, really cool stuff. it's getting overshadowed by Agentforce, but it's, they're innovating again at all phases and at all kind of, areas of the product, which is really kind of great, and again, I don't know where, you would think they wouldn't feel like they wouldn't need to do that because, AI is going to do everything. It's going to be our catch-all, but they really are innovating across the board. And that's, I think, one of the most overlooked things about what they've been doing over the last year. And those things are just going to help as they continue to not only have a great AI story to continue their leadership position in 2025, but to retain legacy customers who are, as companies like Zoho come up and say, this is maybe enterprise ready and it's like a tenth of the cost, right? So that's what's really going to be interesting is, they're fighting hard for their install base, not just as like AI innovators. So, I think they'll continue to do that in 2025 as well. So always an interesting company.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big challenges for Salesforce are around moving all of their customers to core, right? So those folks that are still on pieces of existing technology that aren't on core, so can't take advantage of Agentforce in a meaningful way, but also pricing, right? Having customers feel comfortable with the per conversation pricing brings up a broader conversations for the entire market.
Yeah,
what we
they've already
do
walked
about
into
value-based
that,
pricing versus per seat pricing, right? But I think that the trolls would say that $2 to conversation is too much, and Salesforce recognizes that, but they're going to have to come up with some very straightforward ways for customers to be able to have predictable value-based pricing that they're comfortable with.
And I think they're working hard on that. I think they're doing that. I think value perception is a big thing across the industry, and pricing is changing. We could probably talk about interesting pricing concepts of almost every one of these companies we're going to name. Some of it's more of a marquee kind of thing, but it is changing, and users, AI is changing it because so much is getting commoditized, but also so much of the value is around, to Rebecca's earlier point, the data, right? And if you can do that for me, it's valuable, right? Because people have tried it themselves for years and not done a great job, right? So, there's a lot to that, right? So, it'll be interesting to see how their AI pricing and their overall, like where you look at their per seat pricing on average, where that goes in this new age, right? Because people are going to want to pick up more clouds, or at least more capabilities from more clouds to do more things because of what Agentforce brings to the table. That's great for them, but they do have to realize it's like you squeeze too much, you're going to get pushback, right? So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will say to that point too is, and I think, Rebecca, we've had a conversation about this before, is how Salesforce is sort of layering over product discoverability tools kind of within Service Cloud through My Service Journey to help users extract more value from their systems too, by making sure they're fully aware of everything that's available to them, and all the kind of progress that they've made but haven't made huge announcements about because of Agentforce, to your point, Martin. So lots of really good stuff there. So let's go from one kind of hallmark CRM vendor in Salesforce to one that's kind of, from my mind, maybe this is going back a few years, is more of a conversational analytics vendor, and that is Gong. And I know you wanted to talk about Gong, Martin, so maybe do you want to start?
Yeah, I think, when you look at companies like Gong and you think about where generative and agentic AI, what they bring to the table, almost kind of bring again what we've been saying, right? It's like data, right? Customer signals and intelligence, AI, and workflow is kind of what you really need the most of to really engage, to be productive, to be predictive, to really have a standout customer experience these days. And when you look at Gong's, it's not just a call recording and analyzing it for salespeople. They're really bridging out and looking more around, how do we look at the entire kind of, let's call it revenue journey, whatever you want to call it, right? And really, how do we extract those signals, inject some workflow to make people more productive and to solve problems, get better business outcomes? So they're doing a really interesting thing in that it's kind of like the CRM becomes a commoditized system of record, fine. And we'll utilize that in a bidirectional state. But really, when you think of the real valuable things and where CRM itself has fallen short was, either getting that data, the interesting interaction data, the things that lead you to your next steps, the things that uncover what actually makes people convert or the opposite, churn and things like that. A lot of that has always been ignored. And Gong is that glue that actually comes and brings that together. Now, the CCaaS vendors and other things, they've come from that from different sides and things like that. But the thing is, when you look at kind of the CRM side of it, most people will say, yeah, my CRM is something I have to use, but Gong actually gives me insights because it's just there. It's kind of like I don't have to do anything, and then it's bringing it all to me using AI, right? So it's really interesting to see how players like Gong are going to go out there and create much more robust pipeline management and do a lot of the things around like sales automation that CRM, because of its rigidity around data, its rigidity around UI, it's AI being a bolt-on, and a lot of that is being added later. Like Gong's very native with a lot of this stuff. So I think how they continue to expand out of their core, we're going to record your stuff. We're going to tell you what your sales guys did good and what they didn't do so well, right? And really become more insights driven, really, and start to be able to do things like pull out like what's causing your revenue one way or the other, being able to build much more accurate pipelines. All that comes to growth strategies that can be much more full journey, much broader, and then you're much more inclusive of the customer, the voice of the customer, in ways that traditional CRM just can't, right? So I feel like they're in the CRM world way more than people would think them being, and that's just going to increase in 25 and beyond.
I think across the board, we are moving very quickly toward having conversations recorded and being able to have real time or near real time feedback, coaching, insights on what's being said. Right. So I think we're going to see those capabilities become part of very much core CRM pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
like you look at
to
it.
see where Gong goes and if it stays standalone or if it becomes an accelerant for somebody else to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it could have been like when you look at Slack, right, and you actually look at Gong, I feel like Gong might have been more interesting for Salesforce to pick up at the time than Slack because of how quickly it becomes that it's not things that you're typing, it's things you're saying. It's making it even much again, how do you make that easy button to AI? How do you drive more insights into a very traditional sales cloud, right? And what most core legacy people is like Gong can do that. Again, when you look at like their coaching agents and things like that, how that they're out of the box agents, Gong would supercharge that right alone. So really there's some interesting things that it could very much be a big acquisition for somebody who's looking to kind of leapfrog back into relevance, maybe some of the more legacy enterprise CRM vendor, or someone who's just trying to get yet another home run to stay up front, right?
Or somebody that's sort of CRM adjacent today and looking to gain
as concepts like employee experience become more and more meshy with kind of CRM and vendors, when you think of those types of companies that are doing that, there's a lot of interactions that can drive back from service, from HR, from all these things that actually build your strategy out. So I think it could be interesting for the adjacent guys too.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we're talking about Gong in such detail really says a lot about how the CRM industry is evolving. So I think that's a really great discussion. I do want to move it along from one rising vendor to a stalwart, another stalwart CRM provider, and then a SugarCRM. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to go first on this one.
Sure. I mean, Sugar's interesting. Obviously, technically, always had a very strong product, and Martin knows more than that, more about that than probably most anyone. But it's in a very interesting inflection point for Sugar with a new CEO really thinking about a different strategy. And the question is, can they get beyond the sort of founder's mindset of talking about how clever technically their product is to really connect with their targets in mostly manufacturing and distribution, where they have a very strong value proposition. So being able to communicate that effectively to those folks is really the big hurdle for them moving forward.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Dave, kind of points the ship, because they've had this focus on manufacturing and related industries for quite a while now. But, as an analyst who gets briefed on it, I know, and as someone who's worked at the company for, a combined 15 years or something like that, I knew, because I looked at where our customers were coming from. But I'm not seeing that out there. I'm not seeing like we're the CRM for manufacturing, and their acquisition of SalesEye really does a huge boon to that, right? Because manufacturers know who they're going to do business with, right? And it's not about having a great marketing tool to do, we need to have
lead gen.
Yeah, it's their lead gen doesn't matter. So their marketing cloud isn't as important. And that was always kind of like a thing where it's like, well, it's not as good as what the marketing clouds are, that kind of stuff. But that doesn't matter now, because, do you want to be able to communicate and send emails to the people that you're going to work with? Yeah, well, they can do that fine, right? But with SalesEye, it really does look at, well, what are my customers buying? What are people that are like them buying? What should they be buying? How can I get them to buy? How do you actually optimize revenue inside a kind of customer base that's almost like an install base, and optimize that revenue for every customer? Because that's how manufacturers grow, right? They have to optimize every relationship, and Sugar's building out a product that does that really well. So they just got to say it, right? And I feel like they're still telling this kind of horizontal, we're a CRM, we kind of do all these things, and we've got a platform, and the platform's good, and our workflow is good. And all those things are true for the most part, but differentiate, because all these guys, especially the ones who have far more advanced AI stories, are getting the headlines around CRM. They need to dig deeper into the vertical trenches where they win and where they have affinities, both for what their product does and how it's priced. And I think they can continue to be very relevant in the industries where they're at. And we'll see how they go to market with that, with the new CEO, and as the SalesEye integration gets more ardent. A lot of opportunity for them.
With the new CEO, there are other leadership changes coming.
Yeah.
Either now or soon, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think it's an opportunity to
I don't know
for them to sort of reposition. And it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it sounds like you know something there, Rebecca. So I won't probe on that. We'll move on to our next vendor. This was a surprise to me to see this vendor on here. Maybe a reflection of your visit to AWS reInvent last week, Martin. That is Amazon. I don't know why you want to talk about them as a CRM provider to look out for.
Well, it's kind of like, will they become one, right? And in the sense that when you go backwards from CCaaS and Connect, when you look at the kind of data that they can help with, when you look at the AI story that they have, again, when you look at where generative and agentic AI are going, the ease of building the UX and like the framing devices of CRM is getting easier and easier. So what do you really need is you need the infrastructure, you need workflow, you need data, you need communication channels and that type of stuff. And they've gotten most of that, right? So it's really, kind of where Microsoft years ago was kind of sitting on some puzzle pieces and you're like, are you just going to put it together? And they kind of finally did. And AI helped them a lot with that, right? The Copilot story really kind of helped join up a lot of their kind of strangely not super integrated CRM and CX products. I think Amazon's kind of got the same thing, right? Where it's like, do they want to do this? I think is the big question, right? And that's really what it comes into. They've not been great at application. Amazon and Google are two companies that could do a lot of things, have either chosen not to or just haven't, right? And haven't either executed on it. So I think it's one of those things we're looking at is like, where are they going to go with some of this stuff, right? And that's where I think it becomes interesting when you look at Connect, when you look at Lens, when you look at a lot of their other things. These are CX and CRM products just waiting to kind of, find a bigger audience. And Amazon just kind of lets them roll kind of opportunistically and things like that. So they're kind of sitting on gold mines of stuff. And especially when you think of all the data and all the stuff that can run through, they've got a lot of really things. They can verticalize. They could do things like CRM, and clienteling and profiling and become a retail, CRM powerhouse just because of what they know around that type of stuff. So, and the integrated commerce capabilities and their ability to do really cool stuff around unstructured and distributed data with their various databases. So they've got the puzzle pieces. It's just interesting to see if they start putting them together.
I think it's an interesting thought, Martin, but obviously, I mean, you bring up Google as a company that could never get out of its own way when it came to trying to deliver enterprise apps, right? I wonder if Amazon is just looking at the numbers and saying, we're already making money from Salesforce being sold and run on our platform in a
Right.
marketplace, right? We're getting the data flows from that already. Do we just the partners do this, recognizing that we don't have the sales chops from an enterprise contact perspective? Amazon has, yes, the tech folks, they have the CIOs, but they don't have the head of sales, the head of marketing, the head of service saying, oh, let me go buy Amazon, right? So I think that they're probably looking at the numbers of that and saying, does it make sense for us today, given it's a completely different selling motion than we have today?
Yeah, like I said, I think go to market is really the key thing. Like if they decide or not, right? Does it make sense for them? And I think you're probably right, but it'll be interesting to then if you kind of take Amazon as a components, how much more Amazon will get into other stuff that then runs on AWS, and how much do they start to create, especially with their AI story. How do they get in and become more of that white labeled AI for other vendors who don't have a fully baked AI story, or they knee jerk, they basically white labeled OpenAI or something like that, and then want to tell a better story that might be more industry or use case specific, things like that, or multimodal things like that. So it'll be
Right.
interesting to see how the tentacles kind of get into other CRM vendors and big CRM deployments, and how the SIs kind of figure out where Amazon plays into a CRM initiative and strategy, even if they're not a CRM vendor. So it'll be, they're getting more and more into that, and I think AI is gonna speed that up, because you can do so much around the coding and the other connective tissue of CRM much more easily, and much you can change things much more quickly in a way you really couldn't. So we'll see how that goes.
It was also interesting. I mean, this year they did build the data lake over their CCaaS platform.
Yeah, I
So they're
mean,
doing a lot with
like I'm saying,
that.
you can see these
So
pieces kind of coming around. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's an interesting thought. Yeah, I mean they are doing a lot with Salesforce at the moment, to Rebecca's point, but it could be interesting to see how that develops in
Yeah.
2025. But moving on to our next vendor now on the list, and that is ServiceNow. Like, this is also quite adjacent, but we are seeing a lot more companies talking about ServiceNow in the CX space. I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to go first here.
Yeah, let's be clear. ServiceNow is going after the CRM market, right? They have sales order management. They have the front and back office. They are looking at the database and workflows of not just servicing customers, but selling to customers and ultimately marketing to customers. So while they're not selling seats of CRM today, boy, customer service workflows is starting to smell an awful lot like CRM.
Right.
And I think, if you hear what Bill said in the earnings call a couple of weeks ago, they see the opportunity there. So I think we're going to see them increasingly lean into those cases where it's a database, it's a workflow, it's AI, and it's around customers, and it's around completing those workflows that go way beyond what we think of as CRM today to back office and other systems.
Yep. Absolutely. I think, when you look at where they're going, where they've been, and to Rebecca's point, they've created for their service customers, and the database that they've done is the ability, and the integration work that they've done. You really need to know a lot to create a really, for complex service delivery and all these things. There's a lot of ERP data. There's a lot of all this stuff. So when you really think about, okay, now we just throw a little AI on it. We have the workflow. I'm actually giving you a much more data enriched from the start CRM than if I just deploy Salesforce anytime, right? When you extend it from what ServiceNow is doing, because of that, that legacy and that history and all that stuff, that knowledge and that data and what you need to do. And then when you look at, their business relationships that they have, kind of like similar. It's like taking a much more like kind of enterprise approach to what I just said about sugar, right? It's like you've got this incredible amount of information about products. You've got an incredible information about what people have bought because then who those customers are, and then you're learning from their interactions, and you've got that unstructured data management, throwing the AI on top of it. Now you're able to go out there, and then you're integrating with a really strong workflow with order management, with invoice and inventory, all these types of things. It's really powerful, right? So it's, I think ServiceNow is, one of the most interesting. We do our enterprise awards every year, and they're up that, they were mentioned for a lot of categories because they are really doing, expanding out from that core base and doing really cool things. They are a CRM vendor, whether you think about it.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
not. So,
I think the other thing too that's appealing about ServiceNow is, yes, very strong technical background, right? So when I'm thinking about AI governance compliance, their sort of roots in ITSM appeal to those sort of security, compliance,
yeah,
reliability, availability folks. But also from a go-to-market perspective, they're not saying rip and replace your CRM, right? They're saying, we understand that you may have core systems. Hell, you may still have Siebel running, right?
yeah,
That's fine.
it doesn't
Keep that
matter.
core data because that's important. It doesn't matter. Let us be the modernization layer
Yeah,
around.
yeah. No, that's a good point, Rebecca. That kind of modernization stuff. It's like because they're kind of doing it themselves too, right? Like, and it's like they're almost doing for like anybody what Oracle has been doing and doing well for its own customers, right?
Yeah.
In terms of bringing them, more unity, bringing their cloud together. Because we forget that like it's like the cloud story isn't over for everyone. You know what I mean? There's still a lot of big businesses who aren't fully 100% on the cloud, right? So and when you look at that big, hulking infrastructures that ServiceNow is helping modernize, and they can do it for everybody, right? It doesn't have to be inside your own Oracle install base, for example, right? To go
Right.
to OCI. So their cloud story for themselves and for their customers isn't over either. So there's a ton of opportunity there too. So they've got a lot of stuff, and they've got. Rebecca and I were on a call with them yesterday, kind of talking back and forth on the chat about their impact stuff. Right? They're doing full journey, helping building customer success capabilities that they do for their customers, similar to what you were kind of saying about, what Salesforce does, and are you optimizing your deployment and things like that. They've got
Like
those
my
tools, but
service
now they're even
journeys. Yeah.
productizing them out so their big tech customers can actually figure it out for their customers too, right? And utilize that and become what I would say kind of like full kind of picture, full journey pendos for like companies, like to understand, product usage, to understand success, to understand satisfaction, and to go and do all those things. So there's so many really cool kind of CRM adjacent and related areas where they're building out into in 25 and beyond. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, and I think the biggest challenge for ServiceNow, right, is getting their champions and even their own internal champions to articulate that business value beyond the sort of speeds and feeds ITSM story. Right,
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of high-level marketing and messaging around business needs, around employees, customers, finance, procurement, that sort of thing, right? But for the feet on the street, and for partners, being able to articulate that message and move beyond their champion, who is a CIO or IT service delivery person, to a sales, marketing, service,
Yeah, no, it
finance
does.
leader,
It,
it's their
it,
biggest challenge.
it takes a while though. Cause like think about how Salesforce had to go the opposite way
Mm-hmm.
and how Service Cloud was like, there were times where people would, like recruiters calling you, like, do you want the head of Service Cloud? No, because it was a revolving door and it was hard. But then they got that perception in, they got that footprint in, the product built out, and now Service Cloud's a multi-billion dollar business for them. So ServiceNow is going to do the same thing, just kind of working the opposite way, right? And I think they'll do it because they've been so almost more interestingly entrenched in the enterprise, and IT trusts them. So that's going to be I think it's an easier path for them than going the
Yeah,
opposite way.
that's definitely what we've seen in terms of the rise of AI is shifting the decision making for a lot of these technologies towards IT and away from sort of the marketing, sales, service leaders, and that's very much playing into ServiceNow's hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, another really great discussion, and we've got three vendors to go through to finish off with. And I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Is it Totango? Because it's the one I
Totango.
haven't heard
Yeah.
of, Martin. I don't know
Yeah.
if you could walk me through this one.
Sure. So, and I'll be quick with this one. Totango is interesting because when you look at the customer success space as the kind of the long tail of CRM, right? It's really been focused on kind of workflows that, and I say this a little bit, tongue in cheek. It's kind of like QBR management for customer success managers, right? It's been it hasn't been super intelligent. The data's been okay because you're really kind of relying on like Salesforce data to then feed your customer success data, and that's varying degrees of quality and completeness, right? But what Totango is doing is they acquired a company called Parative AI. They're doing some really interesting things to create much more customer intelligence, much more interesting customer data around behavior, health scoring, and create that overall entire kind of account health score that not just helps customer success, but also comes back and helps other revenue teams, marketing teams, and who to target. So there's segmentation. So customer success is becoming full journey. So does that mean it's becoming CRM? I don't know, but they're just an example of how these customer success guys, whether it's Gainsight, Totango, AI, and data, again, to all the things we kind of keep saying across the board, is really kind of reinventing their product sets, their go-to-market, their vision, their strategy, their targeting. So it's really kind of, I just use them as a kind of an example of like how a couple smart acquisitions and a couple, interesting kind of positioning tweaks can really change the game for, people, because now they were a one product company. Now they're going to be 3 products, around like analytics and they can be multimodal. Some, they're going to have off the shelf stuff that you can just go and say, hey, what's my health score? How am I doing? Who should I engage with? And then, or you can go custom with it and do all these things. So AI is really changing how people not just, focus on what department they go after, but really even how they build out their products and the pricing and the packaging and things like that. So it's really kind of wild to see how they, in just, I think like the second half of 2024, have reinvented themselves to go into 2025 as a multi-product company, attacking multiple parts of the customer journey, not just customer success and CSMs, any member of the revenue team, how RevOps can get, interesting, more strategic views of the customer health and where they should be focusing. Product teams can learn, what's going on with product, things like that. So it's a really, they've broadened their scope, kind of threefold with one acquisition, and it's all around AI. So really kind of cool things there.
It's interesting, Martin. I was just thinking about it as you were talking about that. The initial value proposition of cloud, right? If I think about the early days, was swipe your credit card, pay by the month. If you're not getting value, turn it off,
Yep.
right? Very low friction. And somehow we got away from that in the cloud space. We started thinking about how everything needed to be stickier. And I think we're really seeing a swing back where if you look at what ServiceNow is doing with Impact, to your point, if you look at what Salesforce is doing with My Service Journeys and with their customer success story, everybody's looking at how do we enable both customers and vendors to be able to see exactly how much people are using the software, where they're getting value from it, and then making decisions accordingly about whether they keep paying for it or not, which is the initial value proposition of cloud in the first place. So I think, we're going to see more and more of these folks get brought in to the bigger enterprise players, and we're going to see organically, like ServiceNow has done with Impact, which is a fantastic product to help customers understand exactly how much they're using, where they're getting value, and if it's worth what they're spending or not.
Yeah, it's coming from customer success, or I call it kind of customer lifecycle automation.
Mm-hmm.
It's really kind of, really interesting there. So that,
I mean, and there's lots of interesting things you can do too, right? Because if I'm willing as a customer to opt in, do I want to know that my peers are using a certain piece of functionality more than I am and maybe getting more benefit? Or do I want to know what other customers that look like me are doing that I'm not doing?
Benchmarking is really cool, yeah.
Right? There's tons of interesting stuff that I can do with that kind of shared cloud data model and the telemetry that we naturally have when we're talking about cloud applications.
Exactly.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I think that was a really great example, and thank you for educating me on another vendor there, Martin. But one that I know of, and I think most people will have come across before, is Oracle, and they are ninth on our list. Rebecca, I don't know why you wanted to talk through Oracle.
I think Oracle is different from arguably every other vendor, with the exception of Zoho, maybe on this list, in that they actually have all the finance data, all the HR data, plus CRM, plus supply chain. It enables them to do some very interesting things from an AI and data perspective. Now, they've had their sort of fits and starts with effectively communicating the value of what they do in CRM. But I think what they're able to do from a combined perspective around things like service automation, where I can understand and really deal with complex customer issues and questions that are about financing, that are about service, that are about products, that are about a lot of things that sit outside of CRM, that they're really uniquely positioned to do that. So I think it's a question of them, being able to communicate that to their existing customer base and to those folks that are Oracle shops that haven't maybe moved to CX yet, that there's a value proposition beyond the walls of CRM for them.
Yeah. I think Fusion is real. I think they're doing really cool stuff with that. They've got a great integrated story, bringing in, like, again, having the finance data, having really good CPQ, having all that kind of really good stuff. They create a full journey approach that's really, it's just solid, right? And one of the things that they've said from the get-go is we don't charge for AI. It's just a feature we roll in. So I think that's, again, the value and all that. So I think Oracle's doing all the right things. They're just kind of quietly, making their customers happy, modernizing and transforming their customers' own infrastructures, and they're doing fine doing it. So I think, I think they're just going to keep rolling, doing what they do. It'll be interesting if they kind of start to get into like what I would kind of like other people's territory and try to start to go into like an expansion mode of like, I want to go win market share from other people, because they haven't had to do that. They made so much money from transformation initiatives inside their own install base into the cloud and into OCI, Fusion, that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually start to go out there and say, let's start to win some big new business, right? Because I think they could. I think in the enterprise, they're still really solid. They've got a big IT footprint already in the data side. So, there's a lot of upside for what Oracle can continue to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they're such a big business, a lot of their CRM announcements do sort of go under the radar. So you do mostly hear about the cloud and the ERP and things. But then when I do actually look at the product, I do see a lot going on there. So that's really great. And we move on to our 10th and final vendor now, which is Creatio. So Martin, I don't know if you want to go first on Creatio.
Sure. I think, Creatio is kind of quietly building out, all the way from their days as BPM Online. They've always had great workflow. They've got, some pretty decent and solid, mid-market, cloud CRM applications across marketing, sales, and service. They're with their energy release, they're getting better with their AI story. Some decent, integrations of generative AI into and copilots. They call them skills. Is their kind of generative and agentic AI stuff. They're getting there. I think what's really interesting about them is just how they're changing the pricing game, I think, more than anybody. And I think that's what's really interesting with them is being much more composable, and then how and flexible on pricing is really interesting. They've got an interesting model where it can sometimes seem a little confusing, but it's definitely a good deal, right? So it's like, once you kind of dig into it, you're like, oh, okay, because you don't have to buy into a lot of the AI stuff. They're not putting them out as extra products and things like that. Sometimes, like because some of their stuff is, I think, white labeled, things like there is tokens and that kind of stuff. But the cost to entry to get their stuff going is significantly lower. But the cool thing is they've really componentized what they do. So you have those real composable applications that you can build these kind of really nice kind of hybrid applications that fit your business need. So their flexibility, both in terms of pricing, but as well as like the composability of the applications on the platform. Pretty cool. And I think, I hope that they make more noise in 2025. They're kind of, they've been chugging along, but maybe they'll break through a little more, because they are kind of, I don't think as many people who should be hearing from them, especially in the mid-market, if they're looking or if they're at that fork in the road for reevaluating their CRM, especially as they think of AI, they think of, we want to get more custom, that kind of stuff. I think Creatio is a great choice.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that it quietly, as Martin, as you said, grew to, they passed a $1 billion valuation this summer, right? Creatio is not a small company anymore. But I think the one thing that's been really interesting to me to see grow with Creatio is its partner ecosystem, right? A lot of A lot of vendors grow their partner ecosystem with carrots and sticks. But there is a genuine enthusiasm and passion for Creatio within the partner ecosystem that is pretty striking. And I think obviously that helps them globally. But it's to see that sort of excitement in a partner ecosystem and folks that are really excited about working together is something you don't always see when you talk to partners.
I think the support they give partners, the who they've gone after to get them re-energized, going after people who are working at, products that, maybe not even exist anymore, some of them. So, and getting people to kind of almost like, completely revitalize their businesses by going into working with Creatio, and the speed of innovation that they have, and their kind of cloud story and things like that, really, should excite a good mid-market VAR who's in Central Europe, who's in middle of North America, right? So it's a good I think they've done the right thing in building out their ecosystem as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great place to end today's conversation. Obviously, there were maybe a few names missing in there, which is quite interesting too. I mean, SAP is perhaps one, Microsoft is another one, but I think those 10 stories in there are really great. And we spoke a lot about various trends that are happening within the industry, which would be good to keep an eye out on for the year ahead. But as I said, a great place to end the chat. I really want to thank Rebecca and Martin for joining me today. I think it was a fascinating conversation. So thanks to you both, and also thanks to everybody for watching. Bye for now.
Thanks.